is the UK Brand Show with Penny Williams and Mark Challoner.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the UK Brand Show. Hello, Pen.
Hello, Mark.
And hello, Gerd. We have a special guest with us today, Gerd Leonhard. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hey,
it's fantastic to have you on.
Where are you in? Are you in Austria, Gerd?
No, I'm in Zurich, Switzerland.
In Switzerland, sorry, yeah, Switzerland.
Yes.
Okay, that's your home is near there, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually in my home studio right now. So yes, it's above the ETH, the University of Zurich, right above that. So.
Ah, right. Okay. And so, well, listen, we're so delighted to be that you could be with us today. For those people that don't know Gerd, let me just tell you where can I start? But Gerd is a futurist, a humanist, a keynote speaker, an author, a filmmaker. An amazing background, and he ranks as one of the top 10 futurist keynote speakers worldwide, and he's had over 1,600 engagements in over 50 countries during the past 2 decades, and a combined audience of 2.5 million people. So, and he's written 5 books, including one which I adore, which is called Technology versus Humanity, which is now available, been available for years, but it's available now in 12 different languages. So, it's really brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I just want to start the show if I can, because I've heard you speak so many times, and it's always been inspiration. But I've always wondered, how did you get into this world of futurist in the beginning, and what is the role of a futurist?
Well, I've got into that work, of course, by accident, because I was in the music business, and then I got sucked into the internet business. Doing digital music. I started something a little bit like Spotify in the 90s, it was kind of a suicide mission back then. It was much too early. And then I wrote a book called The Future of Music, which became the blueprint for much of the current digital music business. It was kind of an obvious compilation of ideas, but everybody thought it was, sort of a good way to go. And then basically what happened is people started calling me around 2005 and saying, well, you're a futurist because you wrote a book about the future of music. Yeah? I'm like, what's a futurist? No idea what a futurist is, but it sounds good because, I was looking for a new label, before that I was the internet guy. And then I read all the leading futurists, Alvin Toffler, Marshall McLuhan, Arthur C. Clarke, and K.D. Dick, and of course, Buckminster Fuller, right? And I said, well, this is great. People talk about, the stuff that we could be doing in the future. And I kind of had a knack for understanding the future. But I was always at least 10 years ahead. For example, I thought 1999 digital music moves to the cloud. We can all make lots of money. It's obvious, but nobody really believed me until 2008 or so when Spotify came around, or 10 it was even, right? So basically, yeah, that became sort of my calling. And then people said, well, if you talk about music, can you also talk about films? Can you talk about advertising? Can you talk about energy and oil and gas and money? And before I knew it, here I was looking at the future of pretty much anything and built a company of about 47 people in the progress that are my co-futurists that we work together on a global level.
Wow, okay. So how long would you say you've been a futurist for now?
Well, really, I think since the book, so 2004, 16, 17 years, but I was always very much into this before. For example, when I was in the internet business, I was very good at painting scenarios of the future that were completely clear to me, but not to them, but as a consequence, I was good in raising money, for my company and getting venture capital. But, I've always seen that pretty much my job is not prediction. There's no such thing. You did have people like Leonardo da Vinci, and so that were able to predict the future, real genius, polymath kind of people. That's different. My work is about observation. And it's basically saying, okay, I read a lot of things. I talk to a lot of people. I scout in every possible direction. And eventually sort of a concept emerges by intuition, you could say. That's what every good businessman also does, right? You get an intuition, a hunch, basically, right? And then you say, well, I think, 10 years is going to be the end of oil. That's what I see. And so let's act accordingly. Right? That's kind of what I do. It's not magic sauce or, any such thing. It's really just observation.
Are we not in a world today, though, Gert, where, you know, never mind the future, isn't it difficult predicting tomorrow with this COVID situation, especially?
Well, the future has never been less certain than it is today, that's for sure. On the other hand, we can say that COVID-19 has been a giant accelerator of what was already there before. So basically, for example, working from home and e-commerce and doing stuff online entertainment, gambling, virtual reality, all that's taken a massive boost in the arm, you know, shot in the arm because of COVID, right? And also we have these issues that we have with each other, for example, healthcare or global warming, climate change, right? That's also taken a massive boost because people are saying, well, maybe we have to have more foresight, you know? So in many ways you could say the future is now in a warp drive mode, you could say, you know, because basic questions are being asked about everything. You know, do we have good politicians? Do we have the right policy? Are we able to collaborate? What about the role of science? You know, everything is coming down to a header, like in every crisis. You know, you have things come down to a header, and then people are generally willing to make a move or they crash, right? It's kind of like this in a crisis.
Yeah, sure. Now, you mentioned healthcare there, which sort of leads us quite nicely onto a piece you wrote recently about, I think you just called it simply 12 bullets on the essential post-corona foresights. And it was a lengthy piece, and it looked back at, you know, starting now and looking back at the world and what it could look like, taking all the information you've highlighted there. And the first thing you talked about on that list was, of the 12 points, was all about healthcare, wasn't it? And becoming a public matter and responsibility, etc. Could you talk a little bit about that, maybe?
Well, it's really quite clear that, you know, we knew that the pandemic was coming. Bill Gates said so, and Larry Brilliant said so, and many other brilliant people said so. It's completely obvious. We didn't prepare because we didn't want to spend the money. Yeah? And it's like a priority was to build bombs in the sky that could blow somebody away halfway around the earth. You know, that was a bigger priority in America, for example, than taking care of your citizens. And so what we have right now is really quite clear. We must have a really powerful healthcare system, a system that's affordable, that's equal, that's public. And if we don't have that, then we're reaching emergency level very quickly. And you can see the countries that are quite unequal, like America or Brazil, going quickly to emergency level. And the ones that are prepared, New Zealand, Switzerland, Taiwan, Sweden, and so on, you know, that have a functioning system. So now people are saying, you know what, we got to be prepared, and we're going to put serious money behind healthcare, because this is only the first pandemic, given that we have a global dissemination structure now, right? But we also have, of course, science that if we hadn't had science and technology like we have now, we'd have 30, 40 million people dead now. Right? And if we collaborate better and spend more resources, then the next time we have the pandemic, we don't have to go into lockdown. Right? It's quite clear this is a big priority. And then, of course, technology is converging with healthcare. Right? So it's all becoming about data, about AI, about intelligence, about basically predictive analytics. All of those things are basically in 10 years, the pharma companies will be tech companies, right?
So I presume that's going to be a number of very ethical challenges along the way in all of this.
Well, there are huge ethical challenges, like, you know, if I want to put my data on the cloud, you know, my DNA, my biome, my body data, which has to be, because if it's not in the cloud, how can you compare with others and then figure out how to fight cancer and things like that, right? You need to be in the cloud, just like music, yeah? But if there's nobody responsible, or, you know, if IBM is going to decide what they give to, if IBM becomes the Facebook of medical, you know, then maybe I don't want to be part of that, right? So there are many ethical issues that we have to attach, because it's very powerful and can also be very damaging. Could be heaven or could be hell, as I like to say.
Exactly.
Following on from that, you know, the sort of technology side of things, you talk about the great transformation. I was talking to my son this morning, and I feel we're in such a pivotal moment in time where things are going to change and things aren't going to be the same as they were. And I think your 12 points overall, you know, it would be wonderful if a lot of those do come to fruition and we look at things in a different way. But just taking there's a couple of points that you make about tech that potentially we're going to be more trackable, that we're going to continue to work from home and use the tech to continue. How do you see that sort of, is that going to be more rapid? Are we going to go backwards, or do you think that is the way that we are going to go forwards?
Well, how we use technology is always a cultural question. As I like to say, basically culture eats technology for breakfast. So in some countries like Switzerland, we are already working from home, and we have a great infrastructure, and people are used to that, and it's a very rich country. But look at India or Brazil or Indonesia, clearly that's going to be a challenge to work from home when you have 10 roommates, or when you don't have a setup. So basically what's happening is that we're definitely not going back to normal. We don't even know what that is anymore, because this period will continue until at least the end of next year. We're looking at a global recession and a global austerity measures and global debt mounting, right, with the stimulus programs. So basically, we're not going back to normal. We're going to a bunch of new normals, right? And we have to get ready for this, because the fundamental question, for example, of how we structure our economy, and that used to be based on profit and growth, that is questioned now, because if it's just profit and growth, we're not going to be prepared. Right? So now we have another component, which is purpose and collective benefit. And now the whole question of what capitalism is and what the state should be doing, that's all like up for discussion now. Right? And so the best governments will embrace all of those things and basically use this opportunity as a reset, not to exploit people even more, but to create new principles.
I think the David Attenborough program that's been recently is on Netflix, the profit versus capitalism totally underpins a lot of what you've been saying as well. So you hope that there will be a change, that will start to make some more sensible choices. But that sort of then goes against the conspiracy theory that's out there, that people don't want to be trackable, and almost that they're coming back, the social dilemma program, they're coming back from wanting to embrace technology because they're frightened of it. Do you think that is going to be overcome?
Well, as William Gibson, famous science fiction author, wrote, technology is morally neutral until we use it. So this is not technology's fault, and it definitely isn't the technology company's fault by design. It's just sort of inadvertently all happening, and nobody's taking care of it. This is kind of like alcohol or cigarettes or whatever drug you want to. Technology is a drug, and it's also a religion. So basically, what's happening is like, yes, we can use a hammer to build a house, or I can take the hammer and go on the street and kill people, and I can do the same with AI. And I can do the same with a robot. I can do the same with data. I can be evil, like Facebook is basically, in my view, evil. Or I can take this and I can create something that may be slightly evil, but still acceptable. And so this is a question of balance. And there's always going to be things about technology that could be potentially evil. For example, tracking and surveillance and face recognition. But we can control it through social contracts and regulation and supervision. And, government, that's what government does, allegedly, right? But if government fails to see that how powerful technology is, and that nobody's going to regulate themselves voluntarily, like people don't pay taxes voluntarily, right? Then we have to say, well, it's going to take some government intervention to make sure the balance still exists. And we're going to see a huge amount of that in the next year. Right? And this is going to be the main thing, because technology will be basically unlimitedly powerful in 2030. Upload your brain to the internet, no problem.
Because I presume there's going to be more technology in our lives, not less. So we're going to be more entwined with it.
And so we need technology, right? I mean, if we don't have technology, we can't have the smart city. We can't have digital money. We can't basically solve cancer. We need all it, and that's the power tool. But if the power tool is being used for nefarious things, then we'll have one problem after the other.
I did see something recently. In fact, we had a lady on the show talking about her love of Bill Gersel from Google, head of technology at Google, who was saying that he thinks that there'll come a point where humans become, you know, a subspecies, if you like, to machines through AI learning and all the rest of it by about the year 2045. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I think that the question is not so much about what we can do, because that's the question we used to ask of technology. But now technology is literally becoming the sky is the limit. You know, science fiction is becoming science fact. We have nanotechnology to make a new kind of concrete that is recyclable. You know, we have nanobots that can go in the bloodstream and regulate your cholesterol, or that's not approved yet, but it works, right? We have the Apple Watch checking my oxygen, you know, we have all of those things. So basically you can say in 10 years, you know, quantum computing, cloud computing, 3D printing, sky is the limit, right? So the question is not going to be about what is possible, but about what we want.
Right.
And that is the key question. 2050, which is generally accepted as the overlap of where one machine could have the computing power of all humans, called the singularity, right? And if we want, we can then become technological superhumans. Yeah? It is going to be possible. And the question is, should we do that? And what exactly would it mean? My view is that we wouldn't gain from becoming superhuman. We would probably lose a lot more than we gain. Like, you know, if I can connect my brain to the internet, I can be a great worker, but I would stop being human.
Yeah.
Is that a good deal? I don't think so. So I always say that we should embrace technology, but not become technology.
But who do you think will be the main players by the time we get to that point? In 2050, will it be? Who will be the main people who will influence what we take and what we don't take? Will it be still the government?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think right now the story of the future is being told by the tech companies. And and by Hollywood. And of course, you know what happens in Hollywood, we all die, right? This is what Hollywood does, you know, or Nettywood, you know, if you want to go, Nollywood or Bollywood, right? It all ends the same. We die, we get killed by robots, and it's not funny, you know? And Black Mirror and other things like that. So that's one story. The other story is the tech story, which says technology is the savior, right? Buy more tech and you'll be a happy man, right? And the answer to that is it's not, well, these are just tools. You know, the hammer doesn't make the carpenter happy, the house does, you know. So technology is not what we seek, but how we seek. It is a tool. And when the tool starts becoming the purpose of life, then it's become a religion. Not that religion is the purpose of life. That's a different discussion. But yeah, to me, it's like, okay, you know, we have to at a certain point say, you know what, we have to protect what makes us human.
And again, part of this, I guess, is what you hinted at a minute ago about regulation. That, you know, one of the big things in the news industry has been the fact that all these disruptors have come along, the Facebooks and Google, etc., who just say, when you ask them, are you a media company? They say, no, we're a technology company. And so there's no regulation attached to them, but it has to follow, surely.
Yeah, well, clearly what's happening in social media is that this has become an algorithmic medium. It's basically a giant AI that's milking our data and cranking it around to sell advertising, and tens of thousands of people have nothing else to do but to figure out how we're going to come back and click and sell more ads.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a pretty poor state for media.
Yeah.
You know, it has been dehumanized, and that needs to end. So we have to rehumanize media. Otherwise, it's utterly useless, confusing, manipulating. It's doing all of the right things for the wrong reason. You know, and it's becoming limitlessly powerful. You know, 40% of people get their news on Facebook and 35% or so on YouTube. And guess what's working there? There's no people there. It's all algorithms. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
giving you what they want you to have, because, giving you what they want.
You know, media is basically a human thing. You know, when I read the New York Times or the Spiegel in Germany or whatever, I know who they are and I can estimate what their opinion is. I can trust that they have well researched. But they make mistakes. I mean, to say that algorithms don't make mistakes is utterly ridiculous, right? Because, you know, many algorithms are as stupid as a toaster. You know, they can just 1 and 1 mix 2, and it's just really binary stuff, right? So today I look for something on the internet, and tomorrow I see an ad on Facebook for something very similar. You know, that's what algorithms do. That's not human. We have to fix this, and we're in deep trouble with social media now. Because we've gone down the road. It makes so much money. You know, Facebook makes, I don't know, $160 million profit a day. Right? It's making so much money that everybody's putting money into the stock. And this is like, to me, that's like the new oil company. 30 years ago, we used to put money into Exxon or whatever because they were making so much money and we could make good returns from stock, but it was essentially evil. And now we're doing the same with Facebook. We're getting money from the stock, but it's essentially evil. And that needs to end.
You talk about the androrhythms against the algorithms, which are sort of what you were just talking about. Can you just expand on that in terms of what you mean?
Yeah, humans are not machines. At least I don't believe that we are machines. Some people would argue that, but yeah, we're not just data. And if you look at what humans do, they take in information on a channel like this, right? So when you meet other humans, it takes 0.4 seconds to recognize the other human as a threat, potential partner, or whatever, without saying a single word, right? Machines don't do that. You need a machine to look at 300 million images of a cat to know the difference between a cat and a vacuum cleaner, right? Basically. Right? Humans, a child, a 2-year-old child, pets a cat. It knows from there on every possible variation of cats and, dead or alive or whatever kind it is, it just knows. So we are seeing the world not in zeros and ones. Right? We're seeing them in every possible mutation of between the 0 and ones, what's called multinary, not binary. So we have developed things that are human only that are very difficult for computers. Like the researcher Moravec says, whatever is hard for a computer is easy for a human, and vice versa. Right? So we have things like creativity, imagination, understanding, foresight, negotiation, mistakes, serendipity, accidents, mystery, right? Those are the algorithms that make us human. But, it's very difficult for a machine to have mystery. Machine doesn't know if it's a 0, it's a 1. If it's not a 1, it must be a 0, right? And we are not like this. So we are actually not driven by data in our daily life. We're driven by experiences, emotions, connections, experiences. That's what makes us not a machine, and of course, consciousness and all that. Also assumed human agency and so on. So these are all the androrhythms. And this is what we need to teach our kids, right? It's more important to be a good human than to understand all of technology. If you're a great scientist and a STEM researcher and a great data guru, that's great, but you still need to understand humans. Because in the end, in 10 years, machines will do all of the jobs that don't require humans. Whether it's flying an airplane or driving a car or doing the research or putting my money into the right fund. Anything that's logic only, machines will do.
Good. Just talking about machines, and one of the things and effects the machines will have on us, and you've talked about this in your bullet points about post-corona, is mass surveillance. And there's going to be a lot more surveillance technology around. How do you think that's going to affect our private lives in many ways?
Well, and this is, of course, a really difficult topic because it's not the surveillance per se that may be an issue. If it was safeguarded and controlled by some independent entity or we had some recourse, The thing is that the same tool in the hands of a democratic government like here in Switzerland would be used in a certain way, and then the Swiss government would say delete everything at the end of the year and move forward. And if you live in Turkey, that's not going to happen, right? It's the opposite, right, for the time being, unfortunately. And that is basically, I think, and this is the tough part, right? So we need the tech tools to be better and faster because it gives us huge progress and it solves problems like diseases and traffic and everything. But then we need a sort of independent body that governs that, just like we have an independent body for nuclear energy. Yeah. And so I've always said we need a digital ethics council. We need a universal standard of data security that has to be on the United Nations level, like the nuclear non-proliferation treaties. It says this is your right, digital right as a data user. And everybody has to subscribe to it on a very simple level. Right? Like, for example, face recognition. What do we use it for and what do we not use it for? And to find that balance, that is the job of government and of politicians and of public officials and cities, for example. Like, for example, many companies have now said face recognition, like IBM has said, we don't do much face recognition anymore because it's dicey, that bad players would use it for bad things. And that doesn't mean that the technology itself is bad. It's not. It's like, yeah, we can still use it, but so we have to find that compromise, and we have to have a much more public debate about what it means to be responsible. I mean, why is it that all of the leaders of technology and social media and search are not at all supervised like the oil companies and the banks? They are not, right? They do whatever they please. And some of them are my clients, so I know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And they want to be regulated because it gives them a chance to say, you know what, we have supervision, right? And we can't fall into the rabbit hole of surveillance because, we're being backed up by some sort of provision.
It's very interesting. I watched a program at the weekend about the history of America. It was quite a light run through, and they were comparing the railway track barons to the current tech barons, which would be Facebook, Google, and how actually it's almost history repeating itself 100 plus years later, that the power that they have now is quite significant. And that leads me on. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I will comment on this and say they're actually they were a lot more evil in those days.
Yeah.
What happens to tech companies is not that they're evil. Actually, they're not. There may be a few exceptions, like companies that do tracking by definition. But generally speaking, they're not. It's just that inadvertently it's so powerful it grows to be evil, right?
Yeah.
And that is the problem.
Yeah. And so I'm leading on to point 8 of your 12 bullets, which is that, government today, politicians harking back to a vanished past will be ousted or sidelined, which, in terms of timing with the American elections and obviously a lot of lack of confidence in our own leader here in Britain at the moment, and speculation that Boris will step down before Christmas. You got two 70-plus-year-olds trying to bid for the most powerful position in the world. Doesn't sort of lead you to feel that things are changing, but you feel that they must change.
Well, I think things are coming to a head now when people are sitting there and saying, what did these guys do in the crisis? Did they support us? I mean, Trump just puts out $2 trillion and problem solved, but it's not. The problem is the total dysfunctionality of the state. Right? That's the real problem. And that's not just Trump. That's been like this for a long time. But generally speaking, if you look at the most successful countries around the world in the COVID, and also, of course, before that, that's New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, right? That's Taiwan, that's Switzerland also. It's Norway, it's Iceland, it's Germany, right? Okay, she's an older woman, but okay, so you can say, well, there are a lot more women, a lot more diversity, a lot more young people, a lot more technology, a lot more empathy and emotional intelligence. Jacinda Ardern, when she, just before the re-election, she said the main thing about how we get through this crisis together is by one principle, and that's called kindness, right? I mean, would you expect that from a male politician that's 70 years old? No, probably not, right? So I think what's happening now is people are saying, you know what, in the future can be so amazing. It can be a nirvana in many ways, but we need right governance. And who are those people going to be? It's not a question of age. Sanders is, 80 years old, right? I think he would have done pretty well on an overall level, except for being old, right? It's a question of, how much of humanity can you bring into the job? And this is clearly now a major motif around the world. People are saying Hungary, Poland, how have those leaders, parentheses, reacted to the crisis? And they don't understand anything. It's like, do you realize that, you have to really understand what's happening. You have to understand the future if you're going to be a politician and a leader. And you have to be wise, because I always say the next 10 years will set the stage for the future of humanity. If we don't set it in the next 10 years, then it's going to be very difficult for us to come back, for example, with climate change or artificial intelligence and geoengineering. And, basically it could be total utter dystopia, worse than we can imagine in 2050, 2060, with global warming of 4 degrees, right, for example. And that is going to, millions of people will die from this, not just 1 million. Right? Or we could have reversed the system with good leadership and use technology to solve the problem. Right?
A part of that good leadership, Gerd, and a parallel to that, you've talked about how the European Union would become a sort of United States of Europe, and they're going to be forced to think and act as a united region. Now, having been involved in media circles for many years, the most obvious thing for media to do is to collaborate with each other and work across the UK, work across Europe, work across globally together for the good of the industry. But it doesn't happen. And the main reason why it hasn't happened in my lifetime is because politics or personalities have got in the way. And I just wonder, this notion about the European Union working together, will the same thing apply there? Do you think, how confident are you that everybody will work together from country to country?
Well, you know how things really happen with humans, right? It's only pain or love. It's one of those two things, right? And in America, we have had so much pain in the last 4 years, right? That something is going to happen there. That's my hunch, okay? In terms of the United States of Europe, it's the same thing, right? Either we want more pain and we don't collaborate, or we fall in love with the idea of collaboration and we create something new. Right? And this is how humans change. Humans don't change because of, foresight or long-term planning, right? We're actually not very good at all at this. We have to get better at it, right? But the European Union, the United States of Europe, is the least of the evils, right? Put it that way, right? It is the choice that will be the best, even though it's not in many ways a really great choice all the time, right? But clearly, if we get together, we can save trillions on cybersecurity and defense, right? We can solve the water problem. We can deal with immigration. We can still have individual countries like we have here in Switzerland. We have cantons, that can pretty much do as they please. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, the US was made to be a little bit like Switzerland, except for many things have gone wrong in the meantime. But so this is how I look at it. We have learned in Europe that if we don't collaborate, we're in deep trouble. Like if we're not going to give 100 billion euros to Italy, Italy will become a crashed or failed state. And if we have that, imagine what would happen if one state would really fail, like collapse, right here. That can't be good for anybody. And so this collective thought is a new thought that has been emphasized in the Corona crisis. Either we do collectively good, or we're doing individually great, but then you're super rich somewhere off in the ether, or we're not.
Yeah. And how do you see the UK in that regard, having sort of gone down the Brexit route?
Yes. Well, okay. This is a big topic, but generally speaking, a whole series of bad choices. I mean,
we feel the same.
Well, let's put it this way. I think it's always been a little bit like in the UK, you didn't know if you were part of North America and that hemisphere or part of the other side, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a little bit like Switzerland. They've always had this waffling about, are we part of it or are we not? But we are part of Europe, no matter what the law says. We are very much tuned into Europe. Yeah, same thing. But of course, I'm Swiss and German, so I'm wearing two hats. But I think what I see happening now for the UK, clearly, if there's a turnaround in the US and we see what I call the American pivot, which I have described in my article, which is basically a total utter reset with a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress and House, leading to a whole renaissance in America. Because, there's one thing you should not underestimate from Americans is the ability to turn around on a dime and just do something completely different. This is American ingenuity. We don't have that here. UK has a little bit of that. So when that happens, I think the UK will swing along in this pivot. Right? And that's going to mean a better relationship with Europe, again, altogether. Right?
Yeah.
And generally speaking, I think that would be a great idea. In the end, it is probably impossible to predict if the UK could ever be part of the United States of Europe again. But it could be like Switzerland. Could be like a separate position, but still very much part of it.
So where do you think sort of global travel is going to go? I mean, we've swung from closing everything, reopening parts, and now things are going to close down again. And I've seen a lot of speculation for Australia that travel really isn't going to continue again until sort of 2022, even 23. What's your sort of prediction around that subject?
Well, everything is becoming more localized. So, people are here in Switzerland are going on vacation in Switzerland, staycation as they call it, right? And we're traveling with a car, if we want to be safe. I think that point-to-point travel in Europe will probably come back sometime next year in a bigger way. International travel for business, no. I think that's going to take much longer than that, because the thing is, in the end, for leisure, maybe I can do a quarantine of 5 days. I can follow the provisions, but for a conference to go to Singapore, that would be unfeasible from people from 70 countries to come together. And even when we have a vaccine, the question is who has which vaccine and how does it work and who's resistant, and do I have a stamp, a COVID stamp? Do I have antibodies? And, story goes on. So I see international travel as down, down, down for all of next year, except for maybe the corridors to where we can say there's a safety provision that's being put in place, like UK, Canary Islands, sort of thing. But also very difficult to enforce, So that is, and this is why I think going virtual, and that is going to be hugely boosted. It is not natural for humans. It is not really as powerful as meeting, but this is what we have now. So we're going to see a boom in virtual reality, augmented reality, holograms, online conferencing, remote learning. And then when we can get together again, we're going to have both, right? We're always going to want to meet because that's human. It's like dating, you can date online and you can fish for the right profile and say, that's it, But when you meet 0.2 seconds later, no, it's not real.
But it's also, I've been working from home, so to speak, for a few years now, and I've got used to that environment, but I still like to get up and go to work. So I get up in the morning, I take a boat outside the apartment here, and I go into the center of town. I go to the Institute of Directors where I have a membership, and I go to work, and I have the people around me, and I feel like I'm networking. And I've noticed that since COVID, a lot of people who've been forced into this situation themselves are suddenly, like I did at first, thinking, hey, this is great. I don't have to go on the bus to work anymore, or whatever it is. But suddenly you realize there's a networking problem.
Again, it can be heaven or it can be hell. I don't think that depends very much on what you like. A lot of my work is more solitary and contemplation and writing, and so that's good to be by yourself. But again, I think nothing happens in isolation. And I always say about my presentations, the real thing that happens is not in the presentation; it's in the conversation. Right? And that's just human. That's who we are. We don't exist in data space. And so I think ultimately we're going to continue doing these things, and they'll get much better than any of the things that we have now. But it will be a hybrid scenario in the future, because the other thing you have to consider about travel, the next wave after COVID is the climate change wave, right? And that wave was already there before. We're going to see steep carbon taxes on travel. So same price for the carbon tax and for the ticket. That's kind of what I would say. And for eating meat.
Same price for the tax as the ticket.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's going to start at a percentage and then eventually it'll be the same. And so lots of consideration whether you really need to go. And imagine what that money could do. The World Economic Forum has put together what they call a nature positive investing strategy. And doing these kind of things, we could create about 390 million new jobs, because the money would all of a sudden be there, But anyway, it's a long story. But I think really what's happening is that travel and tourism is completely shifting. It's going to be more local. We're going to keep on seeing each other, but in different ways. And I would expect international travel not to really come back until 22.
And where do all the fossil fuel industries dovetail into that, Gerd?
Well, they're in deep trouble. This is like saying a record store, 10 years ago. Yeah, well, it was clear 20 years ago that music is moving into the cloud. It just took a lot longer. So basically what's happening now is we are at the end of the fossil fuel economy. The concept of oil and gas and coal, exploitation of those without any really consideration of the externalities, that's over. And it's not over just because of an environment. It's also over because it's too expensive. Right? So now coal is already more expensive than solar in many countries. And people are divesting from energy funds. And the last big IPO was Aramco, the Saudi company for oil and gas, and they're going to have a very short window to make money. So basically, everybody's pulling out their money from oil and gas. We're looking at roughly $3.8 trillion of sunk costs in the oil industry. And in 10 years, it's going to be circular economy or none, basically. Right? And we're still going to have oil and gas for quite some time, but it will be rapidly declining. Like, people still buy CDs, right? I don't know who does, I don't know. In Switzerland, they still do. But, music business is online now.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the same. And it's going to be heavily subsidized. We're going to take out the carbon subsidy from, roughly that's about $3 trillion that governments bring into fossil fuel subsidy to make sure that the gas is cheap, right? I mean, that is just a suicidal strategy. So that's going to really change all in the next 10 years, right? Especially now with this kind of opening up of politics. Yeah.
And you have this phrase, which you're famous for, I think, saying that there'll be more change in the next 20 years than there has been in the last 300 years.
Yeah. Well, I have a new one, and I say the next 10 years will bring more change than the previous 100 years. Right? Yeah. Because basically those changes will be a little bit slower than the next decade, which will be 200 years. Right? Right. So, but still, I mean, the world that we know today, when you look back 10 years ago, we didn't have WhatsApp, we didn't have Spotify, we didn't have the cloud, and, okay, big change. But 10 years from now,
yeah,
I'm going to connect my brain to the internet. I'm going to travel in a hologram. I'm going to have 10 billion people on the internet. Yeah, I'm going to have unlimited energy. I'm going to analyze my DNA by default. I mean, we're talking about a whole different cup of tea.
Well, before we let you go, you just talked about Spotify and Netflix, and something dear to Penny and I's mind heart is the media and the newspaper industry, which we both spent many years in. And, that's gone through a massive change, and disruptions come along, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the one thing which the likes of Netflix and Spotify have done is that they've told us that younger people, if you give them something of value and it's a great user experience, they'll pay for it. And I think the news industry has spent so much time saying to everyone, oh, it's free, it's free, it's free. And then suddenly, oh no, we're going to charge you for it now. And I think there's much more resource needs to be put into the user experience. What would you say about your view of the news industry today?
Well, it's really quite clear. If you don't pay, then you are the content, right? That is the principle of Facebook. Right?
A social dilemma.
Yeah, and quite clear that's the case. So a lot of people have started paying, which is good. I think generally speaking, the temptation is to build business models based on advertising, which are exploiting our data. That's also going to end, because basically advertising has become surveillance. And it's become abusive. And when it's too powerful, it's really threatening who we are and what we can do. So there's going to be a lot of media models based on payments, but also public funding. Like, public funding is going to go up for public media, because people are realizing that if we don't have an objective way of presenting things, then we have data-driven manipulation. And the only thing we can do in media, and this is already happening now, is to rehumanize it, right? So have Facebook hire 25,000 journalists and keep them where they are. Just pay for them. Right? It wouldn't even matter to their bottom line. It wouldn't even notice them. It's like, but this is like the oil company. We forced the oil companies to say, you can't drill here, and you have to put the money into the public fund for retribution. And that's exactly the same thing. So in my views, we should talk to media companies and tech companies, the current internet platforms, and say some of the money has to be put back into humanity, and that includes media.
And do you think print is dead?
No, I think print has a good niche in the future in so many ways, that people like print products because they're human, Sure. But we're creating such powerful online interfaces. I mean, we're only at the very beginning of this. I'm much more worried about the even going further with this becoming addictive, in the sense, for example, virtual reality. So as you consume a media on virtuality, your brain changes and you get bored with everything else, I'd be more worried about that one. Like we already have more screen time than people time, and that could also be not such a positive thing. But I have very high hopes about media and journalism and anything that's driven by humans, because in the end, we value things because other humans have made them. Right? It's not because they've been a smart machine with some sort of background algorithm that has set me up to believe the following. Right? So I think that's going to make a very big comeback, and we're going to see more money going into that. And we're going to see more money going to smart technology to help with that. But in the end, it's about the algorithms, yeah? The human component.
So just to sort of finish off today, Gerd, thanks very much for your time. I just, anyone listening into this or watching this, if they've heard a tale of a Terminator future maybe, and we're all scared about it, and what notes of optimism can you give everyone?
Yeah, I always said the future is better than we think, right? And then there's a big asterisk, right? If we design it wisely.
Yeah.
Right? And the future is not bad because of technology. It's not bad because of climate change. It's not bad at all. We have pretty much all the tools we need, but are we using them for the right purpose? Right? And the right purpose is a question of policy and social contract and culture, politics, right? Making the right decisions. If we do this right, we can pull ourselves out of many jams, including climate change. We have to allocate the money, we have to make the shift, and in many cases, we'll probably have to sacrifice things that we got used to, like free media, So what? So now we're going to pay a media tax, and at least we're going to get something that's worthy, we do, that we already had on public TV. And so I think this is really the future. Is we have to decide what we want, and then we act accordingly. If we don't decide what we want, somebody else will decide for us, like Zook and his team, and we'll be stuck in their universe.
I think you're right. Well, I'm certainly positive for that future, and I'm certainly been listening to a lot of your speeches, Gerd, and I'm very positive from the outcomes that you're predicting too. So that's really good news for all. If anybody wants to hear and listen and more about your work, where would they go? Where's the best place?
Yeah, I have many places, of course. If you just Google Gerd, my name, Gerd, like gastrointestinal reflux disease, same thing. You Google Gerd and the future, you'll find all my stuff. But my main website is futuristgerd.com.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm big on YouTube. So the shortcut for YouTube is gerdtube.com. That leads you to my YouTube. So gerdtube.com. And my book is at techversushuman.com. And we finally have audiobooks, by the way, coming out very soon.
Brilliant.
So the book is still very much in the running.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us today. We've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. Thank you.
And
You're welcome. Tell everyone, thanks.
Thank you. And we can tell everyone that we'll be back very soon in a couple of weeks' time with another great guest. And it's Nikki Cox, MBE, who is the editor-in-chief of a newspaper you may or may not heard of. It's called First News, and it's the first newspaper for children or young readers aged between 7 and 14. It's published in full color, tabloid format every Friday, and the readership every month is bigger than the Telegraph and the Times and the Mirror put together, and the Daily Mail put together. It's amazing. It's a great tale to tell, and the editor-in-chief will talking all about what she's doing in that. So do join us then again. Penny, if anybody wants to contact us in the meantime.
Yeah, we're on Twitter at the UK Brand Show, and Facebook, and obviously our YouTube channel and website. You can listen again to this and other shows at theukbrandshow.co.uk.
And we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much to Gerd again for being our special guest today. We really enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.